and welcome to BIPOC STAHC. And STAHC stands for Sustainable Tiny Art House Community. I'm really excited to have you all here today. We're just gonna slide right through these slides. I wanna talk about the agenda, and then after each section, we'll open it up for questions or comments or conversation. And then also, if you don't have an opportunity to ask your questions or give some feedback or comments during the question section, we will also have a question and answer at the very end of this. And then we will repeat and do it all over again.
I just want to add too that if you have questions while Carol is presenting and you don't want to wait, feel free to stick them in the chat and we will collect them and answer them at the end of each section as well.
Awesome. So Devin, can you go back to the slide where we introduce ourselves, the one right before that?
Oh, way ahead, yeah.
Awesome. So I'm Carol Rashana Williams, and I'm a professional artist here in Seattle, Washington, and I am the lead consultant on this particular project.
Hi, I'm Devin Midori Hale. I'm an artist based and living in Seattle, Washington. I'm the community engagement consultant for the BIPOC STAHC. So I'm sort of the doing the outreach with artists and helping Carol with reaching out for people with coalitions, doing the social media and marketing, working on the website. So we're a small company, so we all help each other out with all these things too, but those are my sort of main responsibilities.
Hi, I'm Emmanuel Roy. I am one of the technical consultants on this project, and I'm just here to facilitate the portion of the build for this project.
Thank you, Emmanuel. And we also have another technical consultant, and his name is Alex Chuan, and he's unable to be here today. And then the other person on our team is Innocent Mohala, and he's actually the architectural consultant on this project. And that's our team right now. So the agenda will, we're gonna walk through what is a sustainable tiny art house community, why have we launched this project, where is this project gonna take place, and how is this project gonna take place, when, and then some questions, and then some repeat of the entire thing. So first off, I want to touch on what is this, right? And in order to do that, we need to come to some common ground first and build some definitions around how we view a sustainable tiny art house community and what you didn't know about tiny homes, and what are we building. Can you go to the next slide, please, Devin? So the next slide talks about a sustainable tiny art house community. So the definition for us is, this is an experiential project, and it's an opportunity to explore community development models that are inclusive, equitable, wealth creating, and BIPOC-led. It's also a sustainable tiny art house community that takes into account the environment in which we live. So it's not just, your house, but it's also the energy, water, solar consumption, upcycling, recycling, organic food sourcing, air pollution, and sound pollution. So we're taking into account all of these things. A sustainable tiny art house is also the opportunity for us to preserve culture and provide community and art engagement on a massive scale. We're looking at fostering friendships, breaking down barriers, creating awareness. And in order to do this, we need to place artists at the heart of community development and programming as a major impact on the surrounding community. So now that we have some definitions out of the gate, wondering what your thoughts are about this definition, or if you have any questions about the definitions that we're going to work with during this slide presentation.
And I wanted to invite you, if you feel comfortable, and no pressure to anyone if you're visiting us in a capacity where you want camera off, but if you want to just put your view and gallery view and join us kind of just talking to each other and turn your camera on, we invite you to, but no pressure.
Okay. And you can also put your questions in the chat box. We can address this at the end as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing there's no, because I don't see any hands up. So
do we have any questions about the definitions? Were there any in the chat?
Nope, I don't see any.
All right, so it seems like
All
we
right,
can continue. All right, hold on, let me change my settings real quick. All right. All right.
So now we're gonna, yeah, I can see it. Thank you, Devin. So now we're going to talk about what is this, and in order to understand what this is and why we're doing this, we have to understand that there's a paradigm shift that we are trying to change, and one of the things has to do with what you didn't know about a tiny home. Go ahead, Devin. So what you didn't know about tiny houses is that tiny houses and homes have the potential to allow access to wealth building, sustainable living, and a co-created community around heritage and culture. This is not a downsized model. It's not Seattle's traditional homeless tiny house model either. It's a way to build wealth. And we really are looking at how can we do this in collaboration with other folks? And so we're looking at frameworks that are contributing to discussions that are taking place in a broader context. So not just tiny homes is like a way to downsize for folks who actually already have money. We're not concerned with that sector. We fit right in the middle, right? So under traditional means, BIPOC communities are unable to afford a house here in Seattle. And so this model is hoping to change that. So what else you didn't know about tiny houses is that sustainability is directly tied to environmental justice. And how is sustainability tied to race? We are actually looking at artists and the way that they live in Seattle in terms of the buildings that they're living in, the environment that they're living in, and most situations are unhealthy in terms of, the land being polluted and the air being polluted, the water being polluted. And we're hoping that this is going to be a different option where artists who are visionaries and on the cutting edge of culture and society can actually have a place where they too are living sustainably and being able to be influenced through their art by living sustainably.
I was also thinking about, the environmental racism and, how a lot of times BIPOC and low-income people are put in the most polluted areas and industrial areas in the city, and sustainability is sort of something that comes along a lot of times with gentrification and, these more beautiful parks and greenway as it transitions. The people who are, often most affected by the pollution in cities are the BIPOC communities. So this is another way to address sustainability in terms of addressing environmental racism. And anyway.
Awesome, thank you, Devin. Thank you for that. What questions do you have about this concept that tiny homes are not a downsized model? What do you guys think about that? Does anybody like to agree, disagree? Okay, let's move right along.
Okay.
We're gonna get through this really fast, I think. So there's a bunch of people in the waiting room. I don't know if Emmanuel sees them, but I'm gonna keep going. So
there is one question, and I'll just repeat it. It's, can you talk about how you decide who will take part in your community? And then another question is square footage range for tiny houses.
right. So we're actually looking at a bunch of different sizes of tiny homes, and I will actually get to that towards the end. You'll get to see a video of the model that we've actually chosen and why we've chosen that model. Actually, the next slide will talk about that a little bit too. And how we are actually choosing artists to be a part of this community is basically they have to be a practicing artist, a person of color, and willing to, grow and learn and lead. And be engaged in their community. So it's not about like your resume. It's not about, I don't know. It's really about making sure that artists that are being gentrified out of Seattle or cannot afford to live here can stay here. And so those are the artists that we're looking to engage with. Well, it's middle income to low income.
And also we have and this, we'll share this later, we have an intake sheet for interested artists who qualify, which would just, as Carol said, BIPOC and practicing professional artists, or not even necessarily professional, but practicing. And the dream and hope is that we would be able to fulfill every artist's need. We'll get to this later, but there are currently 11 signed up, and we're trying to get more people signed up. This is sort of that's part of my job is the outreach. And, there are some other, just like Carol said, being openness to learn. So there will be some staged, processes to make sure it's a good fit, which, we're, but yeah, the hope is that we'll be able to fulfill the need and that there will be plenty.
Great. And one of the, I'm going to just move right along on this slide. I think you answered that question very well, actually. I'm not going to go back.
Is this the right slide or?
Yeah, this is the right slide.
Okay.
So why have we launched this project? We've launched this project because we want to advance the economic mobility and opportunity of artists of color. The goal is to keep Seattle artists of color, BIPOC, in Seattle and to allow them to own their first starter house that could be used to purchase their dream house later or provide funds for other dreams. Artists will have the opportunity to build their portfolios, not only on this project, but also on the replicated sites as well. The other thing that we're looking to change or work with under this project is to prevent residential, commercial, and cultural displacement. This project aligns with the need for affordable home ownership for artists of color and activates their voices and their power and commitment to community by being co-located in residential communities. This project model seeks to introduce the tiny house community model with an equity first mandate to Southeast Seattle. So that's going to be the first place that we actually launch our pilot site. And we're doing this to confront Seattle's rampant gentrification displacement of BIPOC communities. So by embedding the project with artists, the community is established by a group with natural pathways for cultural competency and communications and outreach. We're also looking to build on local cultural assets, and we see artists as cultural workers. And without them, our society would be really just bland. And so we're looking at, with low material costs, so upcycling and reused materials, the project may leverage local cultural knowledge, especially from immigrant communities. We're looking at the Rainier Valley, because it has one of the densest East African populations in the region. And it also offers expertise. The artists are, I'm sorry, there's like, the sentence is off, who also offer expertise in landscape, and permaculture and farming. So those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at when we're actually launching this project, is how can we also build permaculture and sustainable farming practices into this model. So hopefully there won't just be like a pea patch on site, but the food will kind of be throughout the houses in the space. We're hoping that the artists can and will act as designers / owners, which is why all of the consultants are actual artists on this project. So they've started at the very beginning, and most of them want a house. And so this is an opportunity for them to get in on the front end and actually help us, and they get to design their own houses in tandem with each other. And we're also looking at promoting transportation and mobility and connectivity. So walkability, connectivity. Artists can have live workspaces which can be toured by patrons and or turned into night markets, kind of like the small trailer park mall in Georgetown, if you guys have ever been there. Except it would be a space where artists actually live and have workspace. So we're looking at trying to create like art walks or community art classes through placing artists smack dab in the middle of a community.
And together.
Yeah. And we're also looking at, we believe that this is part of developing a healthy and safe neighborhood. So we're also looking at water catchment systems and sharing food with our neighbors through responsive organic food, solar power, and being grid tied, because the research that we've done is basically it's easier inside the city to be grid tied. That way we can sell our energy back to the city. And that assures that the land is also being considered as a part of at the heart of the design. The other thing that we're looking at is inequitable access to all neighborhoods. And so we're also looking at creating a land trust or some financial model that the land is held in perpetuity, so that it can only be used for tiny houses forever, or hopefully in, like I said, in perpetuity. So the artist would own the house and the land would be owned by the agency. This model is scalable and replicable and could be used on other sites with vacant land. So we're looking at how can this model also be placed into different areas. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. Can you go on to the next slide, Devin? So why have we launched this pilot project? So I've talked a little bit about the displacement and the gentrification, but the other things that we're also looking at is how to leverage skill sets of those in our community. And so in order to be able to do that, this model is not just about building houses, it's also about building people, right? And people's skills. And how this project came about is basically, I've been doing research on tiny homes for a really long time, but last year, after the death of George Floyd and COVID hit, it became really apparent that we needed some form of healing, right? And some form of way to engage that could be long-term, generational healing. And so I created the Plague of Healing as an art performance piece that is a fundraiser for the BIPOC Sustainable Tiny Art House community. And then Sustainable Seattle really liked the model, and they were like, whoa, we're starting a new fiscal sponsor program. Would you like to be a part of it? And we were like, yeah. And so that's kind of how this whole thing really got started. But because most BIPOC artists have a low median household income and have trouble acquiring homes and are at an increased risk of homelessness and intergenerational poverty, we really are trying to seek a design that is really inclusive, and it's not based on, if you have a degree, it's not based on if you this model is designed specifically for single moms. It's designed for folks who have been incarcerated. It's designed for low-income folks. It's designed for anybody that wants to create a art community within their community. Can you go to the next slide, Devin? Okay. So currently we have 11 artists that are interested in our tiny house model, and we're starting to onboard folks at the end of this month. There's a great deal of positive energy surrounding the possibilities with this project. So we're really excited. We've been able to raise $120,000 in 4 months. And we really believe that this is an opportunity for possible new and better futures for BIPOC artists. Hoping to start similar endeavors with tiny houses and for the city of Seattle. So can you move on to the next slide? What questions do you have about why we've started this?
There's 2 questions, but I think we're covering them in 2 sections ahead, but I'll just read them. From Stacy, on a practical logistical level, how are BIPOC and artists involved in this building process? And also, how can I be involved and volunteer possibly? So we've got 19 minutes left and we've got the where section. So I think we'll be able to get to that before we're all done. But yeah, we'll make sure to answer those before we finish.
Well, I missed the beginning of the what, but I think I've caught up to it. It's a very beautiful model, and you know, kind of has that utopian feel of trying to get as much as you can, you know, not just the tiny houses, but also the permaculture, the organic food, you know, really trying to be comprehensive. And I really admire that. And I think it's great to, you know, shoot for the stars and see what you can do.
Yeah, and it's a big model. But it's also, so just a little bit about me, Carol. I have a master's degree in organizational development, and so I'm deeply interested in systems and how they operate. And so for me, this is it's a passion project. It encompasses everything that I'm interested in and how to actually create a forward-focused future for our kids, their kids, and generations of artists to come. And so our goal is Southeast Seattle right now, but hopefully, oops, sorry. I think I just unmuted somebody. I was trying to let somebody in the thing. Our goal is Southeast Seattle right now, but we're also looking at how can this model be replicated throughout Seattle, maybe in other states, maybe even the rest of the world. So, yeah.
Wonderful.
So we do have one question on private ownership of the house. Is it like an HOA style?
So right now, we're looking at collective models. And so that is one of the models that we're actually looking at. The artists will own their own house. They will own the actual house, but there will be a common space. And I think I can show this. So in the next slide is all about where we want to do this. And so we've phased. We have 3 phases basically. And right now we're currently in phase 1. The next slide, Devin. So this is the land that's been donated to us is about 2.89 acres. So it's about 2.93 or is that right? Yeah, half an acre. And it's in Southeast Seattle, and the launch of it is right in the heart of the Rainier Valley. The neighborhood is among the most diverse in Seattle, with over 70% of the residents reporting as BIPOC identity. It experiences a higher than average unemployment rate of 13.4% and has been exacerbated by COVID, of course. Priorities of Southeast Seattle include anti-displacement, community health, access to healthy food, and culturally responsive environments. The project design seeks to use the land investment to meet essential community needs, so building affordable, sustainable materials, opportunities for home ownership, cultural preservation, and access to safe and organic food. So when we're talking about like size of these particular houses, there's actually, I think, 6 different sizes. And our model, after having conversations with the city of Seattle and their permitting department, has to be designed around an ADU, right? So our idea is to purchase one of the largest tiny homes and then build the smaller tiny homes around that main central house, which means that could actually be replicated on anybody's land, right? If you own a house and you have a backyard and you want to put tiny houses on that backyard, you can turn the main house into the common space area for everybody. Would you like to go to the next slide, Devin? Thank you. So in the space in our pilot project, our goal is to do 3 to 6, maybe 7 tiny homes in that particular space. But we're also looking at purchasing land within the next year. And I'll talk about our partnerships in a moment in order to be able to do that. But on the land that we're actually going to purchase, we're looking to put 25 tiny homes on, and those will be permanent. The houses that will be placed on the pilot site are really one of the challenges that we've been having with folks is that when we start talking about tiny houses, people in Seattle, their eyes glaze over, and what they imagine is these tiny houses that we're building for the houseless. And that is not the model that we are working with. The tiny houses that we're working with actually have full bathrooms, kitchen, living space, loft space, and they're beautiful. And because of the model that we chose, it allows us to cut the cost of building a tiny house by 50%. So that basically means that we can build these tiny homes under $20,000 and sell them for $50,000 or $60,000. And so that folks can actually start to build equity by having their mortgage payment actually be almost 50% less than their rent. We're looking at anywhere from $300 to $500, $600 for mortgage payments. You go on to the next slide. Thank you. And so one of the other things about where this could be, and I just talked about, hopefully we can do this like not just in Seattle, but throughout the United States and maybe the world. We shall see how that happens, but that's kind of like our goal right now is to build the first pilot site and replicate. And that actually takes out redlining, right? Because this could be placed into any community. And if it's BIPOC artists, it's a way to also diversify communities. Questions about the where this project's going to take place and how, like through the phased in?
This is a great question from Gary McNeil. Sorry, I'm stealing your job, Emmanuel. Does the targeted area have to be specifically zoned for tiny home community?
So the area that on that map that we just showed, where our first launch site, our pilot launch, it's such a hard word to say, launch site, is basically zoned for residential and ADU. So in order for us to put the tiny homes there, you have to have one large space or building that is specifically for communal or whatever. And so our the way that we're going to do it is the arched cabins come in multiple sizes. And so we're hoping to put one large one, and that's the communal space, right? And that's like where the residencies will take place and all this other stuff. And, you know, communal eating, workshops, spaces like that. And then the tiny houses will be located around that house. And that's basically the model right there, is that when I say you could do this anywhere, if somebody has a house that they want to, do that with, we could do that with a house that's already built as well. I hope that answers the question. It looks like there's a question about residency feature.
There was also a question before that about the floor plan, but I don't know if we want to wait till I think we're covering that in the next one. Do you want to?
Yeah, that's
cool. Excellent.
Here's one. How are your new neighbors feeling about the project?
So our new neighbors are actually ecstatic. So we are working with, right now they're in the middle of a name change. The land was donated by Southeast Senior Foundation, and they're actually going to be changing the name to, I think it's Brighton Development Group. And so the reason for that change is to be more inclusive of the entire community where this is actually located. And that part of the community is on board, but it's located right in a residential community where there's an apartment building and other things going on in houses. And so one of our models is a residency. So the pilot project will actually be the place where we launch our artist residencies. And the hope is that these artist residencies, these artists will actually, it's a 3-month residency, and they will be able to actually engage with community members within the context of art engagement. So one of the things that has come up is that the land that this is donated on has really large recycling bins that are ugly as heck. And so they're like, can we do something artistically and make this really pretty? And so they're coming up with a list of things that they actually want to see change in their community and make it look beautiful. And so we're using these suggestions as opportunities for an artist residency, where an artist could come in and actually work with the community in which it's located to actually solve some problems for that particular community, or even just do fun stuff, events, night markets, performances, all kinds of really cool stuff. Yeah.
So we've got a couple more. Will there be buy-in from neighbors?
Yes. So once our actual physical buildings are on, the tiny houses are actually on the land, that's when we can start building place. And building place means, getting engaged with everybody that's in that community, right? So yes, the answer to that question is yes.
Next one, are these houses then being sold to the artist once they are completed?
No. So part of this project is one of the things that we're trying to change is this idea that other people are doing stuff for artists. We're trying to actually empower BIPOC artists to actually not only build a sustainable business, but also build their own sustainable house. And so what this means is that the artists that we have are engaged at the front end before the house is even built or designed. And so they get to pick their colors, they get to pick their shelves, they get to pick their stove, they get to pick, they basically get to build their own house out with the framework that we already have. Other questions?
There's just a positive comment from Lonnie, says, love the artist engagement with neighbors and improvements. Who wouldn't love that? That's a great question.
Thank you, Lonnie. That's awesome.
All right.
Let's move right along. Okay. So the next slide is, how are we going to do this, right? Because this is a huge list. And one of the things that we deeply believe in is partnership. And so collective sharing models mean power and collective visioning. So we are trying to leverage the ability for all of us, folks involved in this project, to actually take action together. So because of that, we have chosen the arch cabin design. And we're focused on community development. We're focused on artist residencies and site art activation. These partnerships also mean that it's an opportunity for professional development. So the consultants, so artists actually become consultants with BIPOC STAHC. So so I'm the lead consultant, but I'm not an executive director, don't want to be, have no interest in it. My interest is in sharing power. And so everybody on my team is paid a livable wage, and they're considered consultants, not employees or, folks that are just, trying to work it through the system and not passionate about what they're doing. So in order to be able to do this, our collective ownership model, I believe deeply that it builds collective imagination and an ecosystem of skills and backgrounds that builds collective leadership in co-creating models. So like the question that was asked just a few minutes ago about, will the artists be able to build out their houses, or do they just get the house at the end? The idea is not to just like build the house and put the artist in the house. The idea is that the artist is building their own house, right? With our framework, with our model. And so that that in itself is a community development and community engagement piece. So co-creating models are very key, and it's a foundational piece of this project. We are also utilizing appreciative inquiry with community members and with artists, iceberg models, open cafe conversations, and we're hoping that BIPOC artists will build the tiny art house community in tandem with the surrounding residential community. So it's not like we're just going to go in there and just plop this art community right into this middle of this neighborhood.
I just wanted to add a little bit, Carol, just from my perspective.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so I was hired, and part of the reason why I think Carol, kind of gave me the opportunity is because I'm an artist and I'm actually interested in buying a house. So it's like she said, the co-leadership models are empowering. I have my own business as an artist. Most artists do. And to be able to work, equally with Carol as a consultant also means that like I have more stake in doing a good job, because it's also for my own personal integrity. And for, it just the way that people give when it's like you give an opportunity for leadership. And I see this also with, being in different roles or like being in classrooms, you give people the opportunity and they will rise to it in a different way when when you're given, when you're kind of like given the space to grow. So yeah, I've just, whatever, since March 1st been working with Carol on this project specifically. And it's given me, a month, 2 months now to reflect on like this very different way of working as compared to like a traditional employer-employee boss kind of, boss and subordinate kind of model. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Yeah, that's key. Thank you.
One question on this next slide is why the arch cabin design, and how will these be built with a net zero passive housing or built with a green standard?
Right. That's a great question, and that's actually our next slide. Perfect timing. So part of the reason that we chose the arch cabin design is because it's built green, everything about it. And we actually have a video to show. I think that's the next slide. But structurally, this model is just, the arch cabin is the frame, and then you build out the front and the back and the inside. And it's everything about it is green. The insulation, the paint, the whole design is a green model. And so that's also why we chose this model. And it can also be what's the word? It can also be different for all people, right? So you can have some that have a porch on the top. You can have it be a loft or just one floor. There's lots of different options with the arch cabin design, which is one of the reasons we chose it. And the other reason we chose it is because it lasts the lifetime of a house. And so in order to be building a community design for folks, we really wanted to be able to offer something that was clean, green, and quality, last the length of a traditional house, but actually cost 50% less than an actual tiny house, like all the tiny houses that we're seeing being built anywhere. So that was the reason why we actually chose this model. Devin, would you like to actually show the video? Can you?
Yeah, it should be, but let me go ahead. I can go full screen.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Full screen. Come on, full screen.
And it's going right now.
Yeah, it is. So I'm not sure I can get it to go full screen, but I think hopefully folks can see it. Are you seeing it, Carol? On the in the
well, I have a bunch of stuff open because I have to.
Oh, no worries.
It's quite clear.
Okay, thank you. Good.
Thank you.
Feedback. That's I'm like, I see it, of course, but
So as the video is playing in the background, we do have 2 other questions. How does the plumbing work since the building is up off the ground? And do you have a lead architectural consultant?
Yes, so at the very beginning, we did introductions, and our architectural consultant, his name is Innocent Malala, and he is of African descent. He's an artist as well, and he's helping us with this, with the placement of the housings, the design on the inside, all that stuff. And one of the things that's really also cool about the arch cabin is that it can be put on a temporary foundation or a permanent foundation. It doesn't have to be lifted up like what you're seeing, but it could be lifted up. It can be put on top of a garage structure. It can be put on a skid. It can be put on trailers. And so that's the other really beautiful thing about it, is that we really wanted something that was flexible, right? So I hope that answers the question.
And then the plumbing part of the question.
Let's see.
How does the plumbing work since the building is up off the ground?
Right. So in terms of, so there's different models for how to do the plumbing and the electricity. One of the ways to do that is to actually build it off the ground, but build gosh, I forget the name of it. It's like a thing that goes around the bottom of the house so you can't see the underneath of the house. There's a name for it. I'm sorry, I can't remember what it is right now.
Foundation wall?
Yeah, I guess that's the best way to describe it. But there are multiple, like in this video doesn't actually show that, but there are other images where folks have put all of that technical stuff underneath the house, right? And then you hide it with a build around it.
Oh, some skirting.
Skirting, that's what it's called. Thank you. Yes. So, Devin, can you move on to the next slide?
all right, there you go.
Awesome. Let me get out of the full screen. Okay, so the other piece of this project is that in order to be able to pull this off, we've had to build some pretty extensive partnerships and networks. And so I just kind of want to give you guys like a snapshot of who we're actually working with and where our ties lay. So we're a member of the abolitionists of Pierce County, who are working to defund and eradicate and absolve the police department in Tacoma, Washington, which is a private jail and the worst jail in the state, by the way. And that's because it's located in a community of color and they don't get much money. The other membership that we have our foot in is CORD, and that stands for Community Resource Development, which we're also a consultant on in that project. And there's 25 folks of color on this group. And the focus of this group is community economic development, which creates and manages a portfolio of interacting initiatives with an on-the-ground project, working with impacted people to achieve sustainable, inclusive economic development through communal retention, conservation, and/or acquisition of real estate property, ownership, and stewardship in historically or recently occupied neighborhoods and communities. And so that's a huge part of this project, because we have a team of 25 folks that are actively looking at an initiative to address multiple equity drivers. And currently 5 initiatives of those encompass over $200 million potential for community and real estate development projects. And so working with them, we are all going to come together and purchase a large piece of land in South Seattle to be able to build the 25 tiny homes on. And in order to do that, we're looking at community equity. So most of our financial backing is not traditional backing by any means. We are supported by the City of Seattle, the EDI Economic Development Initiative. We're also supported by the Seattle Foundation and Seattle Justice Initiative. I'm trying to think if there's like another really big one. We're also supported by, like I said earlier, the Brighton Development Group, which is the South End Seattle Senior Foundation. They're changing their name. And we're supported, we have a membership through the American Tiny House Association. And we're also a part of Interweave, which is a new program of Sustainable Seattle, which is how we've been able to get fiscal sponsorship to actually build this project out. And that Interweave program is a network of up to 25 environmental justice and sustainability community organizers. So we receive capacity support through a lot of stuff to achieve our project, and are a part of a cohort designing a common vision for equitable sustainability in Seattle. Some of our networks are the Seattle City Government, Office of Planning and Urban Development. And then we're also working closely with the Office of Arts and Culture, the City of Seattle the City of Seattle's Office of Arts and Culture, and the City of Seattle's Department of Construction and Inspection. We're looking at also lots of other grants to be able to build up like our financial base through lots of different like models and tools and all that stuff. Let's see, we're also a part of Creative Placemaking Team, which takes place actually now they've changed it, it's not every Wednesday, it's every other Wednesday, and it's a team of about 5 or 6 women of color that are doing tiny house builds all over the country. And in the fall, actually, it's not the fall, it's November. From November to April, we've been accepted into the Bellevue Art Museum. And so our goal is to actually have one of the smallest tiny homes there so that folks can actually see and physically walk into it. And, you know, it might not be built all the way out, but we want to at least have the bones there. And we're also supported by EcoThrive Tiny Art House Community in Burien, Washington. We're working closely with them too. They've been a great support. So let's see. So with the community development piece, our goal is to allow artists to lead in their own community development and just kind of share power. And through that, we're looking at site art activations. So our vision is to have this site buzzing with so much art that people want to come there. Right? So murals, performances, sculpture, digital, writing, visual, public art, anything you can think of, hopefully. Yeah. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So through our programming, one of the things that I just talked about was the artist residencies. Those will be a 3-month residency. And once the artist completes the residency, our goal is to have it be a $5,000 paid residency, but it's specifically for them to learn about circular economy, to learn about sustainable living, to learn about all kinds of things that we've been talking about, so that they can influence their community. And through that artist residency, we're hoping that we can have sponsors that will sponsor each artist by anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 in order to build the arch cabin. Each cabin costs about $20,000, and that's with it being shipped here, the material costs, and building out the inside. And so when we're talking about how can we have artists in resident actually live in these tiny homes, we're hoping that they will be so immersed in sustainability and a green infrastructure that they will, like, it'll change their lives forever. And they'll be able to build and live sustainably. And that will in effect impact their art, which will in effect impact the community. We're also looking at memberships in our programming and creating a tiny house coalition so that we can leverage the minds and power of folks that are just interested in tiny houses. So that could be anybody that's a land developer or somebody who's just a student in college, but they want to learn about this and support something like this. And then we're also looking at launching our coffee hours within the next few, I think it's the next few weeks. And this is an opportunity for us to showcase like upscaled artwork, conversations about tiny houses and tiny homes, videoing and doing virtual conversations around all the stuff we just talked about, circular economies, permaculture, stuff like that. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you. And so another part of how we're going to do this is that we know that this is an experiment. Our pilot site is a launch experiment. And so in understanding that this is an experiment, we're hoping that we can build collective power through different levels of all of our programming and outreach and stuff. And so through that, we're testing out sustainable business models and development. We're also providing professional development opportunities for folks. So a lot of the consultants on the team, they are learning so much and they have access to lots of training because of the nature of the way our business structure is designed. And then of course, we're looking at appreciative inquiry and systems theories to really inform not only our structural, but our programming arms of the project. So I think I should probably say this too. So collective ownership, collective imagination, and ecosystems of skills and backgrounds, collective leadership, and co-creating models. That's what we're interested in. So I just want to reiterate that this is an experimental model. And so there's definitely going to be some kinks that we're going to be working out. But overall, The goal is to build a common purpose around sustainable practices and living, and really have that reverberate out into the community. Kind of like a drop in a pool of water, right? Where the ripple effect is so big and massive that everybody's interested and wants to know more about sustainable living and green infrastructure. And so that goes back to this idea of the collective power and how that can actually be initiated in the community. Questions? Ahas? This isn't gonna work for you? No. Anything? Oh, what is appreciative inquiry? So appreciative inquiry is a way of engagement, and basically it is inclusive. And so the way it works is, I don't really want to get into it too deep, but you can also look it up. The way it works is that when you have a group of folks in a room and you're trying to garner information or get them to engage with each other, you pose a question, you don't make assumptions, you pose a question and you let folks answer it. Then you pose the same question again, then you let folks answer it. Then you pose the same question again. And after posing the same question and maybe even reframing it, what ends up coming out of the conversation is way more juicy than if you only ask the question once. And systems theories is basically the theory of all of the models that underpin our society, right? So our government system, our jail system, our educational system. So it's all about systems and how these systems are designed and created, and the infrastructure for those, for all of the systems that we have currently, according to our model, are wrought with racism and really not inclusive in a lot of different ways, right? You have to go to 9-to-5 job or else you get fired, right? Or if you make a mistake on a presentation, you get fired, right? Like all these different things that are not helping folks get forward is basically what systems theories and models are. And we're looking at actually implementing a lot of those systems, which is how this project is being built. Like I said, it's an experiment and we're trying it out. You're welcome, Stacy. Other questions? I don't see any more questions. Have you heard of nonprofit humble design? I have not heard of nonprofit humble design. That sounds really cool.
I think
so. Let's go on to the next slide, Devin. Awesome. So when will this happen? Like I said earlier, this is a phased-in approach, but we've been fundraising since November of last year, and we currently do have a fundraising campaign online, which you can find on our website. And in terms of the phased approach, our goal is to be able to order at least 3 or 4 tiny homes by July and have them placed on the property sometime in the summer, early fall, so that we can launch the residencies. And then within the next year, we're looking at actually purchasing property with the other group, CORD, the Community Organized Resource Development Group, the Brighton group. And so because we've chose this model, the arch cabin model, it also cuts down on permitting because it's shipped here and you put it together. And so in being able to actually get it up and running shouldn't take that long. Like the city of Seattle was telling us that it actually cuts the permitting coding, or not the coding, but the permitting in half. So 6 months is like the longest that we'd have to wait for that. You can move on to the next one, Devin. Okay, so phase 1, I wanted to see if I can, it's so tiny on my screen. Phase 1 is to complete 1 tiny house prototype And like I said, we're actually shooting now for 3, and complete our feasibility assessment, and then attain permits and mobilize artists to help in the plan, design and create their own tiny house. And then the third part of phase 1 is to mobilize the surrounding community to gain buy-in and educate on the process of sustainability and of the sustainability of this project. Phase 2, we're hoping to build and move in, and that could happen anywhere from, like I said, anywhere between the end of this year and the middle of next year. Of course, allowing time for the zoning and permitting process to take place. Another thing about phase 2 is that we're looking to create and implement a design for collective ownership of the land through a process of appreciative inquiry with the artist. So this means the community development piece. I believe somebody earlier had asked a question, when will artists be involved? And our goal is to have the artists involved at the very beginning, which is where the residency comes in, right? So a part of that residency is for them to explore what would their house look like, what would they desire, what are, colors, all that stuff. And then phase 3 is basically to replicate anywhere that we can replicate it.
So let's take a moment here and kind of go over some summary questions. So I've got a couple here in the chat. Are there large enough pieces of land still existing in the area targeted?
Yes, there are, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's nothing on it. So the land that we were donated on, or the land that the pilot project will be on and that was donated to us, actually sits on 5 acres. And they are actually in the process of redeveloping the entire 5 acres. Yeah, I think that's the answer I have for that question. Did I answer your question?
Or assembling a number of pieces of land. I guess that kind of ties in. The other question is shipped here with built shell or shipped here in parts to be assembled.
Yeah, so it's actually part of the reason we're not doing modular homes is because modular homes, they're really hard to get the city to pass. So these are not considered modular homes because the pieces get shipped and you put the pieces together yourself on the land.
And then how about how are artists investors in this project?
Can you clarify what you mean by investing?
How are they financially tied to the project?
Financially tied to the project.
Or how can they invest into this project?
Okay, I'm not really sure I'm still understanding the question. Is the person that asked that question still on the line?
No, but we can go for another question. How is
I can try to answer that question. It's just when you say invest, I think of invest in a lot of different ways. I think of investment as a professional development and how do you offer your skill set to this group, right? And you can become a consultant or something with us. That's one way to invest. Another way to invest is to actually purchase a house, right? So you could offer your time and skills around that. Yeah, okay. I don't know if I'm answering the question fully, but.
And then just another one, how are BIPOC artists uniquely affected by climate change?
So when we talk about climate change, we talk about the impact of resources, right? So for me, it's about resources, access, opportunity, and exposure to resources. When we're talking about environmental or climate change, the most impacted communities are communities of color because they don't have access to wealth. They don't have access to generational wealth building, actually. Some do, some don't, but I mean, generally, overall speaking, traditionally, that's been the case in this country. And so when we're talking about communities that have been forced to exist or live in certain areas because of redlining or because of predatory lending or because of all these things that affect your ability to be able to thrive in your own community, it makes it really difficult for folks to even see themselves in a house, right? That it's hard to vision that. And the other thing is that because Seattle is so expensive to live here, in terms of resources, artists are always the last to get like acknowledgement of their work. And we can provide some resource links and some statistical stuff on that as well, if you're interested. I think it might actually even be on our website, I'm not sure. But when we're talking about, you know, the impact of environmental devastation, usually it's communities of color that bear the brunt of that. And we've seen this through COVID, right? Like they're on the front lines working, they're in communities that are struggling and stressed out. And it's because of this financial wealth gap, right? And to me, that's a sustainable problem. It's a huge challenge, right? And that's part of the reason why this particular project has been designed with that in mind, in terms of the folks that work with this project are consultants. They are not employees. And that model we're hoping to shift. We're hoping to shift this concept that, you know, everybody has a skill set. Everybody can contribute. Everybody can like participate. But we have to be open for participation and diversity to happen. And so if folks of color who are the most impacted by climate change are not in the room helping to design new models and envision new ways of being and doing things, we're going to keep doing the same old thing over and over and over, which is why this design, we're hoping that, you know, having artists in at the very front end and all the way through every time we replicate, that maybe we're weeding some of that out, right? Other
Well,
questions?
thank you, Carol, for all those lovely responses. If anybody has any more questions, please post in the chat. And if not, I believe we will repeat at 10:20 or 10:25.
Other questions? Any more questions?
Are there any questions? Like we kind of skipped through the when. Does anyone have any questions about when in particular? Or anything else? Our website is up on the screen, as well as our email and the Google Forms, which Emmanuel has been sharing in the chat as well. So if you easier to click through on the chat, you can find them, scroll up, or we can post it again. Yeah. Was there anything we didn't cover? I thought we were shorter on time for a bit, so we were moving a little faster.
I know I did move really fast because I thought
I did too. I'm sorry. I like double checked it.
Okay. Well, I mean, we could also just have a conversation about what folks think about a possible tiny art house community. I mean, does it even sound realistic? Because like I said, this is an experiment. Like, does it sound feasible to folks? Like,
right? Or
is that exciting? Would you like a tiny art house community in your backyard?
Or where does this where does your mind take you when you encounter this idea? Do you see yourself in it? Do you see yourself wanting to see it next to you? Do you think like, oh, I like that, or I like some parts of it? yeah, when you imagine it, do you imagine the whole thing? What do you imagine? And if you feel comfortable and want to just be in a conversation and feel comfortable to turn your camera on, we can do a gallery view, gallery conversation if you like, but no pressure.
This is Stacy. I think I'll forego sharing my video so you don't have to see my bed head. but
No problem.
but I just wanted to comment that I'm so excited that this is going to be in Southeast Seattle, because that's my community that I grew up in. So I can totally see it in that community. I think that's going to be a real benefit to that area, definitely.
I missed the beginning of it, so I might I'll come back and I that's why I was not going to ask a bunch of questions, because you probably covered that already. So I just thought I'd start at the beginning. But here I can do the video. Okay, there we go.
I love to see your face.
Here I am.
Here you are.
Yay.
Nice to see you.
Hi, good to see you too. Hi, Devin.
Hi, nice to see you. Looking forward to our next meet.
Yeah, I will. I'll be back. And yeah, my questions, do you want me to tell you what they are?
Oh, please do. Yeah, we'd love to answer them.
Oh, actually, I love the arch cabin. And do you know there's a group down in Eugene that's building something kind of like that they have a video on the like they go through the whole construction of it. Have you, and they use it as kind of a barn raising strategy in their community. So
barn raising strategy, what does that mean? What do you mean?
Where you get a bunch of people together to build it together, and it builds community in the construction. Right?
That's what we're trying to do too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's so much a part of your model is community engagement and getting people to know each other. And so at the end, you don't just have a house, you have a community of relationships. So anyway, I just, when I saw that, it's like, oh gosh, that looks like they call them Conestoga Huts. And they're smaller, I think, than what you're planning, but the construction is very similar. And I think because they're so much smaller, this was a few years ago, but the construction costs were like $750. So it's a different thing, but some of the way that it's put, the way that it's put together there's some similarities. I don't know enough about what yours is. But I
have that link or the information. Could you put it in the chat? I'm really curious.
Sure. Yeah, maybe I'll look for that. I've
Oregon has some really cool stuff going on.
Pardon me?
I said Oregon has some really cool stuff going on.
They really do.
I almost feel like I'm living in the wrong state, you know?
This is Kelly. I just wrote down this one key phrase, and I just was going to point it out to you that how much I liked it, which was that tiny homes are a way to build wealth. I love it. I love it. So thank you. Thanks for sharing everything.
Thanks, Kelly.
Kelly.
Yeah, it's funny because, when you start talking about wealth creation, people's eyes glare over if you're talking about it in BIPOC communities, right? Whereas folks who are used to wealth creation and who have generational wealth creation, where, your mom or your dad passes away, they leave you a house, you get that money, you redistribute that money back to your own family, and then somehow their leg is lifted up and they in turn do the same thing, right? I think the challenge for our country is to really not lock people out of wealth creation and really provide skills and resources around wealth creation and different models on how to do stuff, right? Because a lot of people in my community, they deeply believe that I have to work for somebody, right? And they can't understand, Carol, why do you want to be an artist? Because I get to work for myself. I get to work for myself. I get to keep my money. I get to put my money where I want to put my money, as opposed to, having having to be told to do certain things in a hierarchical organization or system. And so I know for a fact that my community, I grew up in Germany, but I also grew up in Tacoma. We ended up in Tacoma, and I was in Tacoma. I was in an all Black community, and nobody had a house. Nobody had any money. Nobody had, it was, people rented houses. It looked like we had money, but when it came down to it, a lot of folks die without anything to pass on to their families. And so I really wanted to find a way to offset that, even if it was just a drop in the bucket, and to a lot of rich folks, $50,000 is like a drop in the bucket, right? It's like, well, why would you even do that? It's not enough money to do anything. But for somebody like me and my community, $50,000 is like, whoa, like I could do a whole lot of stuff with $50,000, And so rethinking this paradigm around what's possible or what should be allowed in our country is really necessary. We need to start having this conversation on a broader context, because so many people are losing their housing, and that was the other thing that is really beautiful about this model, is that it doesn't have to just be for artists, right? Like this model could be replicated for folks who have been incarcerated. It could be or coming out of prison, right? Or it could be for single moms who just want to support each other but live in a community together so that they can share resources. And so for me, that's really I'm really passionate about it. I'm so excited that we have the opportunity to be doing this in this community. It's really cool.
Just looking back through the, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can go back or maybe, what might be kind of cool? Can we look at some of the other videos of the tiny art house?
Yeah, I think so.
Can I put the link in the thing and we'll show one more?
Yeah, put the link in there for me, and I'll share.
Yeah, then you share it. Yeah. Okay, here it is. I really like this one. I think this is the.
You have no idea what your teams can accomplish until you've tried Monday.com.
I'm going to put the other one in there too, I think.
Is at the Wild Current Farm in Johnson City, Texas. This arch cabin is 16 foot wide. It's 15 foot tall at the peak, and it's 18 foot long. Inside, you have 288 square feet of living space. Now, what they've done is they've put a 6 foot overhang along the front, which gives them this area for the deck, and then the deck is extended another 2 feet. So the deck is actually 8 feet. And then in the back, there's a 2 foot overhang, and that covers the mechanicals that they have in the back. I spent the night in this arch cabin. This is the first time I've spent the night in an arch cabin. And what it did last night was it rained. It rained a lot. You can even see the rain still here on the tree. I did not hear anything, not a peep. Even when I was awake in the morning and heard the rain, it was just a light pitter patter, just like I would hear in my own home. They use closed cell spray foam insulation within this arch cabin, which gives us a really nice, tight, sealed envelope. And as far as the temperature is concerned, it was really cold last night. There's just a 1-ton window AC heating unit in this arch cabin, and that kept it a constant temperature throughout the entire night. Underneath this arch cabin, you can see that they have the skirting, and they left this little access door here. And you can see underneath here is all of the mechanicals, and you can see these beams that they have. So this is on an elevated platform. This is solid limestone. So they drilled down 5 feet. They set each one of these piers. He said they're 5 feet apart. This is solid. He said they've had winds up to 80 miles an hour here and have had no problems whatsoever. And this is the back of the arch cabin. You can see the 2 foot overhang where they have to protect the mechanicals. This is the 1-ton unit that they have here to heat and cool the arch cabin. And they left these accessible in case they need to get down there for something. This is just a nice little touch that they have where they're directing guests to each one of the cabins. These are the type of things that you can do. If this is something that you're interested in, like having these cabins and renting them out on Airbnb or VRBO or something like that, just these little touches make it a nice experience for the guests. This is a map they provided of the property. This is the gate where you come in, you drive down this road. This is where you pass their main home. And then you can see the different arch cabins right here. So this is Wren's Retreat. That's the larger one. You have the Hummingbird's Haven, which is right here. And then over here is what they call Cardinals Keep. And the way that they have these set up, they're close to one another, but you cannot see one another from the cabin. So it gives you a lot of privacy. But even putting together this map like this is just another nice touch to allow guests to get a real good overview and perspective of where the cabins are in relation to one another. They call this arch cabin the Cardinals Keep, and you can see that it has a beautiful red exterior. And that's one of the things you can also do is you can customize the color of the arch cabin. This one is also 18 feet long, 16 foot wide, 15 feet tall, has 288 square feet of living space. And again, they did the 6-foot overhang in the front to have the covered patio. They have a 2-foot overhang in the back to cover the mechanicals. You cannot really see it today because it's overcast and it's raining, but this cabin right here has an amazing view of the sunsets. This arch cabin is 24 foot long, 20 feet wide, and 18 feet tall. Inside on the main floor, you have 480 square feet of living space. They have a loft here, which takes up half of the interior. So it's 12 feet deep in the loft area, 20 feet wide. So you have an extra 240 square feet up top in the loft area. They actually lived in this arch cabin for over a year while they were building their main home. You can see they have a deck you walk up to. If we look here along the side, you can see this area has some slope to it. That's one of the nice things about building these on the piers is that you have the ability to build in an area where the terrain is diverse, yet you do not have to do all the groundwork that you would if you were to lay a traditional foundation. A lot of the properties that we sell are in the mountains or have slope to the topography. Some of them are actually on the side of a mountain. This is a solution that you could utilize to build in those heavily sloped areas where you would not have to invest in all the excavation work to level a building pad. If we look here along the back, you can see they have the mechanicals set up on the sides. They put this protective barrier here so that no one is cut from the sharp edge of the metal sides. You can see how the ribs snap together, and this just goes on the exterior, all done by these bolts to hold it in place. And you can see, and this is super tight. There's not wind or water, anything that's going to get up in between this seal. We've now shown you a green exterior, a red exterior, and this is a nice blue exterior. They have a wide variety of color options to choose from. And then on the back of this arch cabin, they built this really nice deck. And one of the things they say is it's really a blank canvas for you to create whatever it is that you'd like to create. And we can see with a variety just here at this one property, what they've been able to do. So just imagine what you can create with an arch cabin.
Another really cool one was this, I think it was this short one. I don't know if this is the right one.
Is it in the slideshow? Was it a link that was in the
Yeah, I was gonna put it right here.
Oh, okay.
So one of the things that's also really interesting about the arch cabin is that it lasts the lifetime of a regular house. One of the things that was really hard to find when I was doing all the research was to try and find a model that's just like a traditional house, right? But half the cost, or not even half, it's like a fraction of the cost. So that's one of the really cool things too about them.
This is Stacy again. Would you mind if I asked a quick question?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Just because as I was watching that video, I thought of something. So far in this presentation, which all of you have done an excellent job with, the focus has been on the actual building, the structure. And I was just curious about your thoughts, ideas, or plans so far regarding the landscape architecture, because that's a huge part of the property and the value of the property, the curb appeal. So what have your thoughts been so far regarding that?
Yeah, so we've actually been looking at a lot of different things. And so that particular, the donated, where our pilot project would be, we've been looking at how do you actually, not only do like permaculture and gardening that is clean, but like, how would we have the front of the space that butts up against a parking lot? Like, and there's been talk about maybe large, huge trees or large, huge, to buffer between, like a sound barrier buffer, visual buffer between the actual land and the parking lot. But there's been a lot of talk actually just how are we going to place these? Like our architect he's got a mini design. I wasn't able to put it in our slideshows, unfortunately, because he doesn't want us to show it yet because it's not permanent yet. But we have been having conversations around that as well. Just like, what could we do to make the land also look very appealing and very welcoming, right?
Yeah, the site map that we had a session with all of our team to sort of give feedback on the last one, and things that we're thinking about with design are, how to facilitate, naturally with the way things are laid out, layouts that lend themselves to community, like having the, what layout the houses are set so that their natural pathways will cross, or maybe having options, or, where there might be an open playfield space or an amphitheater, or where we might want the communal building facing. So yeah, this is, I think, like Carol was saying, I think the appreciative inquiry process for each artist site. And I don't know, Carol, also, I don't know if you want to talk at all more about the permaculture, because I think that's also a really cool part of the land development part, just for folks.
Well, I mean, do folks know what permaculture is?
I think it wouldn't hurt to talk about it. Yeah.
Well, as a part of the design, like right now, there's actually a pea patch on that land, but I just got a thing. We're going to end in 2 minutes, so I'll talk really fast. So there's actually a pea patch on that land. We want to redesign that so that the food is actually meandering throughout each house, or maybe each house is focused on a certain crop or something like that. But permaculture basically is this concept that you could have multiple seasons in one space, right? So you can grow in the fall certain things, but in that same space, then in the winter you'd grow something different, in the spring you'd grow something different, stuff like that. Yeah. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm gonna have to get trained on permaculture big time to really make it happen, but
sounds super cool.
I love the model of it. So yeah. Thank you everybody for coming. This was so much fun.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Have fun at the rest of your day.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
This was really fun. Thanks, everyone.